Swami Kriyananda. This week, self-effort too is needed. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. Following commentaries based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. These past weeks, we discussed the need for balancing self-effort with receptivity to divine grace. Both are important in the spiritual life. Passive dependence on grace hasn't the magnetism to attract grace. Boastful self-confidence, however, which closes itself off from the higher divine power, is shallow, brittle, and, given life's many uncertainties, susceptible to ultimate failure. There's a story in the Bible that illustrates the need to put forth personal effort so as to draw magnetically on the divine power. The story occurs in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 8. But as he went, the crowds nearly suffocated him. Among them was a woman who had had a hemorrhage for 12 years and who derived no benefit from anybody's treatment. She came up behind Jesus and touched the edge of his cloak. As a result, her hemorrhage stopped immediately. "Who was it who touched me?" Jesus asked. When everybody denied it, Peter remonstrated, "Master, the crowds are all around, pressing you on every side." But Jesus said, "Somebody touched me. I felt power going out from me." When the woman realized that she'd not escaped notice, she came forward trembling and fell at his feet and admitted before everyone why she had touched him, adding that she had been instantaneously cured. "Daughter," Jesus said, "it is by your faith that you have been healed. Go in peace." Self-confidence and self-effort are necessary, as the ignition of a car is necessary to the motor. Of what use the ignition, however, if the motor itself will not work? Wise is he who recognizes the real power in the universe and guides his life by that supreme power. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 9th chapter, "To those who meditate on me as their very own, ever united to me by incessant worship, I make good their deficiencies and render permanent their gains." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Oh.
How are you all?
Awake and ready.
Fabulous. Great topics today. Self-effort too is needed, and renunciation. When these topics showed up for the weekly service, I reflected back across the now decades of this life. And I realized how unlikely my life has become. And I'm sharing this personally because these are very, very deep topics. And they're central. Yogananda writes in Metaphysical Meditations, life, you just observe, life is a struggle for joy all along the way. Think about it. Isn't that what we're all reaching for? Just every one of us in every moment, we're reaching for joy. We're reaching for a connection with life. To feel somehow what we know intuitively has to be true. That there's a fullness, a way of being in life that's absolutely, profoundly satisfying. And that is continuously so. It's not boringly so. It's not like we hit this plateau and everything levels out and it's all just harps and music and clouds. That every single thing is divine and is filled with magic, and that we're connected in the most meaningful way and supported by it and relevant to it. Life is a struggle for that joy all along the way. And then he writes, may I fight to win that battle. on the spot where I now am, not someplace else, not in Hawaii, although it's probably not a bad place to fight the battle. But not looking someplace else for that to happen for us. And I realized I grew up with a deep, in the Midwest mostly, I grew up with a deep hunger for that connection. And I looked around me and I watched people. I came with the attribute of observation. And if I had nothing else, I at least had that. And it looked to me like the way people behaved toward each other and themselves was absolutely insane. That people treated each other degradingly. That people handled their relationships with themselves as if they themselves were flawed or meaningless. That there was a distance between that wholeness that I knew intuitively was there, had to be there. This is an interesting thing. Yogananda said the human mind, and I would go ahead and say the human soul too, is so limited that there's absolutely nothing it can conceive of that does not already exist somewhere in the universe. Now that's a huge limitation. It's enormous. But whatever you think of, whatever you feel is there. So that yearning, that wholeness had to also be there. And I found myself going through an endless, I developed a scientific nature because I wanted to know what it was that was going to work and who had it. And I couldn't find anybody that had it. I just looked and looked and looked. And people would seem whole in certain circumstances. But then life would do something that would shatter their confidence, shatter the connection. And I'd go, that's not it. I could tell that they had a part of it, but they hadn't figured out the whole thing. And I went through college. I was a pre-med student, and I was in the sciences, and I was watching. In science it's great. In the laboratory, in the chem lab, you put this in and that in, and this always happens. It just works. I figured that life had to also be that way somehow. The human reality, that if you behaved certain ways, that certain things came as a byproduct. Well, I watched, and one of my favorite heroes, and I'd idolize somebody until I watched them kind of fall off their pedestal, and I go, well, that isn't it. So I'd look for somebody else who had it. And year after year after year, I did the college thing, I tried business, I tried anything that would, and it's important to know that success went along with everything I touched. I did it deeply enough and with enough focus and attention that I became successful at business. I became successful in school. I became successful at whatever I touched. Because if you're not successful, you don't know whether that's it or not. But if you're successful in it, and you look around at the others that are successful, and they don't have what you're looking for, you can tell that that's not the answer. Well, I became more and more desperate the more and more things I was successful at and couldn't find in the eyes and the behaviors and the patterns and in the aura of the people that I met, the things that I was looking for. And about the time that my soul was suicidal. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't know where else there was to be. So being suicidal wasn't a matter of going someplace, but I couldn't find a way to get up in the morning. And I was getting up for backpacking and hiking and for just going through the motions because I knew that lack of energy wasn't it. I knew that when I was lethargic and allowed depression to set in, that I lost whatever I had, but I couldn't find what was going to get. And about the time when I just couldn't stand, and I did therapy, I did self-help, I read all the books, the Dancing Woolly Masters and the Tao of Physics, and all the stuff that was out there. I read Teachings of Don Juan, all the stuff that was around that time. I tried drugs. I tried it all. And about the time I just couldn't, I was out of any place to look, a good friend, handed me a copy of the Autobiography of a Yogi. And they said, what you're looking for is probably not out there. Which at that point, I kind of thought, well, that was a weird answer. But then I read the book, and I saw, finally, there was somebody who had the joy that I had always intuitively known was possible. And so I started studying the teachings. I started applying that methodical, scientific approach to, And the first thing I read, and I've never been able to find this phrase anywhere in his teachings again, but the first thing I read of his teachings after the autobiography when I started the lessons was, I do not ask you to believe anything I say. I ask you to try what I say long enough to prove to yourself whether it's true or not. And then he said, an ever-increasing dynamic willpower is the soul-saving grace of mankind. Isn't that interesting? An ever-increasing dynamic willpower. Self-effort. We have to engage. And then he writes time and time again in millions of ways that we have to engage our will daily in the practice of good things until our will becomes the dynamic will of God. So he's giving us clues on how we can start to expand. And then he defined the goal. Again, he defined the goal not as some antiseptic thing, but he said self-realization, the awareness of the presence of Spirit. Self-realization is the knowing in every part of body, mind, and soul that you are now in the possession of the kingdom of Spirit. That you need not pray that it come to you, that it is yours already. How could it not be? Every scripture says God is omnipresent. That means, look inside. He's there. The closest point of contact is right inside. You need not pray that it come to you. It is yours already, and all you need to do is improve your knowing. And then he described it as ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new joy. Oh, wow, that's what I've been looking for. But how do you anchor that? Not pretentiously, not fictitiously, but really in the moments of the day. How do you anchor that joy? Where's the joy? I mean, okay, Hawaii again, the joy is obvious. It feels good. It's sensory. The mangoes drop into your laps. They peel themselves. Bananas show up. Everything is there. Just life just hands all the sensory pleasures. The oceans are warm. You can go up and poke the lava. Where can you do that on this planet? The lava's even gentle. But how do you take that when the tragedies of life, which come to all of us, how do we take and experience that joy? Where is it? What is the key? When we know that the distance between how life is behaving and how it should be is irreconcilable. How do we handle that distance? And that is what Yogananda addressed. That's what, through his teachings, he started to say, this is how you find it. This is how you find that joy that's always there. And these are the things that you have to do. If you go into the laboratory and you drag all of your music and all of your furniture and all of your goodies and stuff, you're not going to do the experiment. You're going to be watching your little iPhone. Right? You're going to be playing with all the goodies. So you're not going to do the experiment. And there won't be any room. Or you'll start the experiment and the Bunsen burner will set everything on fire. You have to clear away the things that make it possible to do the experiment so that you can see what comes out of the experiment. Oh, okay. And about that time, I ran into Ananda. I'd been on the path a couple years. I'd been taking Yogananda's teachings. I was out there. I was doing the organic farming thing, and I was living on a little tiny organic farm, about 50 acres. We had a handful of Jersey cows that we milked 4:30 in the morning, 4:30 in the afternoon, and we had, and I'm out there trying to learn to energize, and I'm reading the little book, and I'm trying to learn to energize, and I'm doing Hong Sa, and I'm beginning to feel an awakening sense of possibility and vitality and strength. But I also kind of looked around, and I was the only one doing it. And I thought, this is lonely, and it's going to take, how long is it taking me to do the study of the paper and do the thing? And then I ran into Ananda. And I ran into Ananda, I went and visited. And I heard, while I was there the very first time, I heard a quality of laughter that I didn't know existed. It was pure. It was untainted by sarcasm or derision or negativity or pain or stress. Listen to laughter, if you ever listen. And I had never listened before, but it was so pure, it was so full of joy, it was so untainted that I immediately went, oh my God, what is that? It was like the music of angels. It was like some other planetary thing. Any place on this planet that can produce a sound like that is a place I want to be. It was so magical. And then I looked around, I started to visit, and I looked around, and I started looking in the eyes of the people that I met. And I saw something that I'd never seen. I saw that I'd never seen lastingly and universally. I saw that wholeness. I saw the light. I saw a sense of confidence and connection to life. I saw strength. I saw joy. And one day, this is just a silly little aside, but one day I'm down at the market at Ananda Village, which was very funky back then. It was 1985, 84. And I'm sitting at the market outside. If you've ever been to the village, there's a nice little green in this funky little market, and there's 4 or 5 steps that go up. And I'm just hanging out there and enjoying the peace and the serenity of the village, and all of a sudden the door pops open, the screen door popped open, and this giant of a man, he must have been about 12 foot tall. It's Ananta, for those who know him. He's about, okay. He popped out the door. I didn't know who he was. He was just this guy. And he marched down the stairs with this vitality and vigor and single-pointedness and energy and flow. But it was light. It was just exuberant. I went, oh my God. And he just marched across the field, and then heading for his car. He was going to go someplace. And in the middle of that, somebody came out of the thing and said, Ananta. And he stopped. And without missing a beat, he turned around with the same energy, came back and met them, stood there like this, completely connected with them. The second he was done, he was gone. And I thought, what just happened? What just happened? I've never in my life known anywhere that I wanted to go with that kind of clarity and that kind of energy. It was just so uncomplicated, but it was so uncomplicated, his life, that he was able to suspend whatever he had that kind of energy in to be able to address whatever life asked. And then he was just back to whatever was needed. That is something so beautiful, so powerful. How did he get that? I want that. Across time, I started to realize that the people of Ananda, first Sunday service, after I attended a Sunday service much like this, afterwards, I asked the person sitting across from me, I'm already a devotee of Yogananda, remember that. And I'm heading for Kriya Yoga. I've been studying very earnestly the teachings. And I looked at the person across, I said, what is Ananda about? And they didn't give me a whole litany of the teachings and stuff. They just looked at me and so simply, she said, Ananda is about you becoming who you are. And I got it. Because everybody I'd seen wasn't like a cutout copy of somebody else. They were completely themselves. But they were completely themselves unencumbered. They weren't encumbered by a lot of social imposition and mores and standards that meant nothing. They weren't aspiring to look like the people on TV or the movies. They weren't aspiring to anything except to the wholeness of their own nature. And they had found the practices that allowed that to come out and be whole and be expressed and be true. And they weren't wearing it like an overcoat. They were shedding all of the stuff that was blocking it. And so it wasn't like they had to hang on to it. It was like they were letting go of the stuff they'd been hanging on to so they could just live in it and express it. So, needless to say, whatever they've got, I want it. If this is where it leads, I'm all about it. So I moved there in 1985. This is about renunciation. This is about the question of from being basically, did the drugs, I did being very worldly and very engaged in outer things, trying to solve life. How did I end up here? If anybody had ever said that I would ever be a minister, I was if you took the entire high school, I would be right at the bottom of the pile of those least likely to ever do something like this. But I was always sincere, and I always wanted to understand what was true. Not theoretical, not from somebody coming up and telling me. In fact, I remember in college, I reached a point, because there was a lot of proselytizing and a lot of people trying to tell you that Jesus was the way, or that you should become religious, or that. And I thought, the next person comes up to me like that, I'm going to poke him in the nose. It's not about the outer things. It's not about the theory of it. I don't want to hear somebody sell me a bunch of snake oil. What's true? And how can I experience it? I want the laboratory of my life. I want to be able to add this and this and this and this and come up with joy, come up with wholeness, come up with wisdom and power and strength and clarity and real love that lasts. How do we find these things? And Yogananda said it's very simple. It is not easy, but it's very simple. We have to turn our attention away from the things that don't work and begin to give our attention to the things that do work. And then we have to exercise ourselves ourselves in the things that we're told. Because every single thing, a friend of ours, Dr. Peter, he's a Kriyaban, he's a Tyagi, he's in the Renunciate order. He's a physician. And he's done decades now of study on neurotheology. The bridge, that place where spirituality and the mind and the nervous system merge. And neuroplasticity, my dad was a psychiatrist back when I was growing up, it was absolutely known 100% that your mind, your brain, stopped developing around the time you were 21, and from that point on it was a downhill slope. And that you never got any more brain cells, you just became dumber across time, and there was no help for it. Now, of course, they know because they've done research and they've seen and they've watched that every single thing you think, every single gesture you make imprints on the brain, and the brain tries to take that and reinforce it. What you do today is making who you are in 6 months. You want to know who you're going to be in 6 months? Right now, is it more true what you're doing or who you are right now? So in other words, if there's the old fake it till you make it, okay? Is that a true thing? What you do now is who you're going to be in 6 months. So if you're faking it right now, if you're giving it everything you've got right now, it's going to be real in 6 months. So that's more true than what you already have, because what you already have right now, who you are right now, is simply a composite. Who we are is simply a composite of where we've been for the last years, decades, commitments we made 6 months ago. And what he said was, the simpler your life, I'm going to read this, because Swami Kriyananda, very interesting. Swami Kriyananda was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. So he was a direct disciple of his, and Swami Kriyananda founded Ananda based on those teachings. And he created a membership vows if you wanted to join Ananda. And I found these fascinating. He said, these are some of the secrets that Yogananda taught. And so he said, there are four vows that you take, 4 commitments that you make to support your effort to live in that joy, to live. Ananda, by the way, fascinatingly, Ananda just means that joy. That's what the word translates into. He said there are 4 vows, and they are simplicity, self-control, service, and cooperative obedience. It's not poverty, chastity, and obedience. It's simplicity, self-control, service, and cooperative obedience. And then he described them. Simplicity at Ananda is not described as poverty. It's having everything you need to do what God asks of you and nothing more, nothing less. Personal example, by the time I'd been on the path for any length of time and living at Ananda, I had virtually nothing. I slept on the floor, I had a couple little blankets, I had a couple outfits that I wore for work and a nice outfit for Sunday service. I had a pair of shoes that lasted for all of that. You know, and it was so simple and easy. I had my builder's tools because I was a builder, but I didn't have anything more than that. You know, I had my choir music because I was singing in the choir at that time. But nothing more. You know, I had my little harmonium, my little meditation area. And then I went deeper and deeper into renunciation and into monasticism, and now I have a temple and teaching center and 2 communities, and and all the accoutrement that go with all that. You know, renunciation and finding God are not like we think they are. The path is deceptive. So anyway, simplicity is having what you need, nothing more, nothing less, so that material things do not intrude on one's inner freedom. That's all. Self-control means always to hold one's physical sense pleasure in rein, and to strive to direct one's energy from the senses to soul consciousness rather than the reverse. It's great to enjoy things. Enjoy a beautiful sunset, enjoy music, enjoy friendship. But don't enjoy them on the surface. Enjoy them deep inside, in the soul. Feel them as an expression of God's beauty and love. And when you eat the ice cream, feel like you're really enjoying it inside anyway. It's not the ice cream, it's the response, and the response is inside. Understand that, feel that, live inside of those things. He said, service means less the actual activity of serving than the love one channels while serving. Isn't that beautiful? You have to be doing something for the love to flow. But it's the love, it's the care. And it's interesting that the more love there is in your service, the more you'll serve. Because it feels so good having it flow through you. One of the things that Ananda has known for a long time is that service is joy. The more you serve others, the more you open yourself, the less you're self-concerned, the more that joy just awakens and the more you just want to have of it. And then cooperative obedience. Instead of just, yes, sir, it's, well, help me understand. If this is what's needed, if this is what's trying to happen, help me understand so that I can cooperate, so that I can be engaged in it. I wish we had hours. I wish we had weeks to do this. We're going to go ahead and wrap up now because we're just out of time. But what I found across time, renunciation, Swami started a monastic order. And it was one of the first things that one of our little supportive teachers, she's now one of the center leaders in a Swami, world-known Swami in her own right, but back then she was just one of the teachers of Ananda. She said, only when you've given everything to God will you find yourself completely free. Christ said, surprisingly, for those who would go, oh my God, he said, seek God first and then everything else comes. God gives back everything. He knows our hearts. And all the things that our hearts yearn for come to us as an extension of our relationship to God, not outside of it. And it all comes. You can't avoid it, in fact. But she said, we'll never be satisfied until our hearts are completely free in God, completely given over to that joy and that love. But then she said, and we could do it. You could do it right this minute. If you could do it wholeheartedly, you'd be free right this minute. But she said, some part of us holds back, and so it becomes a negotiated process. And, we kind of like lawyers. What's the little joke about the little boy wanted the bicycle? And his parents weren't going to get it for him. So he thought, well, Jesus, so he started praying because he knew God can give it for me. God does everything. Jesus, if you get me that bicycle, I'll be good for a whole week. And then he thought about it and he thought, that's not enough. Said, okay, Jesus, if you get me that bicycle, I'll be nice to my sister for a whole year. And he thought, well, I'm never going to be able to stick that one, so that's off the table. And all of a sudden he got an idea, and he got up from his little meditation area, and he went up to his mother's room where she had this beautiful statue of Mary. And he took the statue of Mary and he wrapped it in a beautiful blanket and he tucked it in a box and he stuck it way, way up high in his closet. He sat back down and said, Jesus, if you ever want to see your mother again, oh, why do we laugh? But that's what happens. We negotiate. But gradually what we find step by step is that we get tired of the things that we hang on to and we let them go until somewhere along the way we just realize the only thing that works, the only thing that lasts is that joy. We meditate deeply, we pray, we share it with each other, we serve, but the things that we serve, they don't last. Even the most magnificent things don't last. They're worth doing because of what it awakens inside of us, because of the beauty that it brings to this world that helps others to see what's possible. But it doesn't last. The only thing that lasts is when we live in that lasting joy. This is from Whispers from Eternity, Yogananda's book of prayer demands and poems. Divine Mother, come thyself into the waiting temple of our love. Divine Mother, be thou the only flame shining on the altar of our hearts. Burn away the darkness that lurks there. And that's all the sadnesses of all of our hearts. Be thou the only fragrance rising with the incense of our love for thee. Permeate any dark nook in the hearts also of those we love. Divine Mother, unite our separate hearts into one great love, wherein thy omnipresence can rest forever and forever. Teach us to behold our latent perfection in the clear mirror of thy divinity, and let the altar flame of our love for thee rise in triumph, shaming the little hissing sparks of all earthly desires. Steal softly into the silent temple, Mother. With lambent flame, banish the darkness of my long ignorance, and grant me safety in thy ever-shining bliss. Take a moment of silence.
I'd like to offer is also written by Swami Kriyananda entitled Life is a Dream.